Dear friends, welcome to 2 Abstractive. In this video, we are going to be discussing on OSI model. Firstly, OSI model is termed as what? Open System Interconnection model. It is a model which is used for standardizing communication network. We know that a whole network is a huge, is very huge and complex, right? So, in order to make the troubleshooting of networking problem easier, a method or a protocol is developed, the model is developed, and we term that model as what? OSI model, right? As it's been said, it's what? It makes the troubleshooting of network issues easily, as it breaks complex network into what? Several segments called layers. So a complex network, it breaks it down into several segments, and each segment that it breaks it down is what? Called what? A layer. Now, even though the OSI model is obsolete, right? Which means it is old, right? It is still considered to be a reference model, because these days we are actually using TCP IP, transmission control protocol, with IP address, right? Like with internet protocol. So even though the OSI model is old, right, it is still considered to be a reference model in which it allows to understand how network works. So it breaks each and every problem down. If you want to watch a video on using your, let's say, any video player, MX player, or something like that, there's some series of information. The video you're actually watching consists of zeros and one, right? Which is a raw data. So that zeros and one, which is a raw data, understand, is converted into, or is allowed to go into several stages. And several stages it is allowed to go through down to the application layer, which is the MX player, which allows you to watch that video. Those things that happen behind the player or the application, right, is what we call the network, right? And in the OSI model is there to make sure everything is much more easier. Now the OSI model consists of 7 layers. This layer is called what? The upper layer is the application layer. We have the presentation layer, the session layer, the transport layer, the network layer, data link layer, and physical layer. This application layer is the highest, right? This is the layer we, the human, the user, work with, right? The physical layer is from the data point, the zeros and one, the conversion whatsoever. Now, if we are coming this way, this is the way we come, right? We come from the application layer down to this side. But if we want to transmit the information for you to see it on the application layer, we go this way. That zeros and ones going to series of it down to it. Now, a way in which you can memorize that is using a mnemonic. When we talk about mnemonic, like a shortcut for you to be able to record that easily. This is it. Please, you start from the bottom, right? Please do not throw sweet potato away. Please, the P is standing for physical, D is standing for data, N is standing for network, T stands for transport, S is standing for station, and P presentation away, right? Then A stands for application. That please do not throw sweet potato away. If you can hold this, then I believe that you will be able to know anything about the OSI model. Because by continuing, we demystify some concept more. So let's look at the first layer. The first layer is actually the physical layer, right? The first layer is actually the physical layer. The physical layer is the lowest layer, right? And one thing I want you to recall about this physical layer is that it deals with bits. And for you to recall that easily is that, look at the letter P. Just think of P. Inverted P is B, right? Inverted P is B, which is bit. So a physical layer is dealing with bits. So if you can hold that in, you'll be able to know what the physical layer is all about. Now let me tell you more about what the physical layer is. The physical layer is responsible for conveying or transferring streams of bits across a network. Every information we know of, even though we might not be able to see, it consists of zeros and one. Your songs consist of zeros and one. Videos consist of zeros and one. Now, those bits, which is zeros and one, right? The means in which you transfer them, or we generate them, or we create them, right? That process, or the device you use, all of them reside in the physical layer. All those connections, the ports, the laptop, the cable, whatsoever, they are all the physical layer. You understand? So the transferring of bit is possible, right? Electrically and through radio waves. That is wireless. Now you send in current with voltage, which represent what? And we send voltage signal, which represents zeros and one, or through wireless wave to represent zeros and one. That's what the physical layer is all about, right? We transfer bits, zeros and one, right? That's what they are all about. So we transfer zeros and one. So what I want you to understand about the physical layer is that the physical layer is responsible for what? The transferring of what? Zeros and one. Right? So let's proceed. The device and medium in which physical layer exists is that a cable in the wire is also a physical layer, because if there is a problem, we go check the port. Okay, check the port if there's a problem with the port. Or we go to the hub. The hub is like a device in which will allow us to connect multiple computers together. Actually, repeater also and network. All these devices are under what? Physical layer. Right? So let's look at the next layer. The next layer is the what? Data link layer. The data link layer, if you look at the letter D, right? D, after D we have letter F, right? So I believe you will be able to recall that F is frames, right? So data link layer is dealing with frames. And what does frame means? It simply means that the data link layer takes what? All those streams of bits, which we call packets, right? And put it into a frame. Conceptually, you'll be able to understand it this way. Look at this, right? Look at this 0, 1, 0, right? All these zeros and one, these little bits, right? It packs them and put them into what? Frames, right? So conceptually, right? It does so more complex than this, but the way you can understand it, that's this, right? That's the data link layer. It is responsible for what? Attaching a physical MAC address to a device. What is a physical MAC address? You know, every building has an address. And as they have an address, it allows you to locate what each and every what house in a street or in a particular location, right? So likewise, a data link layer is responsible for attaching a physical address, a MAC address, what to a device. Now, the device that what reside in this layer two is the switch and the bridge, right? Because they deal with what? The MAC address. So let's proceed to the next layer. The next layer is what? The network layer, right? The network layer is responsible for addressing and routing. You know, the physical layer deals with the bit, right? The data link layer packs the bit and put in enter frame, right? Now, in transferring of that, like giving it a path, a road to follow, right? A network layer is responsible for that. It allows you to address and to what? Check the information and to what? To route it, right? So in essence, it is responsible for what? For addressing and routing of packets of data. So those data that is in frames, it's responsible for addressing them and routing them. So in essence, it uses a what? An IP address and a what? A MAC address, right? And the device that can be found in this layer is what? Is a router, right? So let's look at the what? Next layer. The next layer is the what? Fourth layer, which we call the transport layer. The transport layer is responsible for managing what? Delivery of packets. You know, the packet from the physical layer down to what? Data link layer and network layer, right? In managing those, managing the delivery of that packet, like checking, is the information sent? Good. If it's sent, right, it send an acknowledgement saying, okay, we send the information successfully. But if it's not sent successfully, it said, oh, there's a problem, some missing packets, right? So this layer actually uses what? A TCP and UDP. A TCP is actually called transmission what? Protocol, right? Control protocol. And UDP is user datagram protocol. Both of them are quite similar, and they are responsible for what? Handling what? Error and sequencing to ensure that there are no missing what? Packets. Let's look at that. Imagine we are sending an information, right? 1, 2, 3. We send the information to the receiver side and it what? It received 1, 2, 3. It's a good. I send an acknowledgement. Yeah, I successfully got the information. But if not, we send 1, 2, 3 and it's only received 1 and 2, which means there's a missing packet of what? 2 and 3. And they say, wow, I missed an information. Then it send what? Another acknowledgement saying that what? We miss out something. So that's what the transport layer deals with. Now let's look at the next layer. The next layer is the what? The session layer. The session layer is responsible for what? Setting up or terminating what? Session. You know, for instance, if you're calling your colleague, you know, definitely there's a time that will be displaying like, okay, this is time you spend calling your colleague or your friend, right? So this session is responsible for what? The starting and stopping of first session. Now, in other words, it's responsible for setting up and termination of communication between local and what? Remote application. That's what the physical the session layer deals with. So let's look at the next one. The sixth layer, which is what? The presentation layer, is responsible for presenting of or translating of information. You know, those zeros and ones, we transport them then down to the session layer, which is responsible for terminating and setting up session, down to the physical presentation layer. Now, this presentation, I need to convert those zeros and ones because actually human beings don't understand that. So it's responsible for translating those data. It encrypts it, that means it secure it or decrypt it. It compress it or reduce the file or decompress it, right, to get the original information, right? So that's what the physical and the presentation layer deals with. Now let's look at the last layer, which is the upper layer. The upper layer is actually the application layer, right? It manages what? Communication with end user. This is the points, right, or the layer that we the human, right, work with. Now, it allows user and application to what? Communicate. It supports protocols such as HTTP, SMTP, browsers, right? etc. Now, looking at HTTP, we term that as what? Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It's an application layer protocol for transmitting hypermedia word documents such as HTML. You know your website. You see HTTP, there's something like that. So it's telling you that we are dealing with the application layer. Like we have SMTP for Gmail. If you want to transfer Gmail, use SMTP. We have FTP, which is the file transfer protocol for uploading files. We have the browser like Chrome, Mozilla, and so on. So I hope with all this you understand what the layer have, right? Let's review what they are all about once more. The OSI model consists of 7 layers, and the 7 layers is either moving downward or moving upward. The lowest layer is the physical layer, and the upper layer is what? The application layer. Remember that you can recall it as what? Please do not throw sweet potato away. Now, the physical layer, which is the lowest layer, is dealing with bits. Remember the P is with bits, right? The data link layer after the letter D, we know F. Definitely, it is dealing with what? Frames. So it packs those bits, right? Into frames. The network layer is responsible for routing those packets or bits, right? Packet of bits. Now the transport layer is responsible for what? Checking if the delivery of that information is good, right? Is it right? The session layer is responsible for what? For dealing with determination or setting up of what? The communication between what? Different local and what? Remote application. The presentation layer is responsible for what? For presenting or translating or encrypting those information, right? Why the application layer is responsible for what? For managing the communication between an application with end user. It makes sure things are easier for us, right? For us to understand. So I hope with this, the concept about OSI is clear. If you have any question, feel free to ask, and I hope to reply. Thanks.